US President Donald Trump is squaring off with the governors of some of the country's biggest states over when to lift lockdowns that have paralysed the world's largest economy. Trump says the federal government will decide when to ease restrictions, but both Republican and Democratic governors have been quick to push back, saying it's their responsibility to decide when it's safe to go back to restart their economies. 10 major states, including New York and California, have started coordinating plans to ease lockdowns and let businesses reopen separately from the White House.
The President of the United States calls the shots. If we weren't here for the states, you would have had a problem in this country like you've never seen before. We were here to back them up, and we've more than backed them up. We did a job that nobody ever thought was possible. It's a decision for the President of the United States. Now, with that being said, we're going to work with the states because it's very important.
Okay, and for more on this, Mickey Levy joins us now from New York. He's chief economist for the Americas and Asia at Berenberg Capital Markets. Welcome back to Money Talks, Mickey. Now, can I start with the IMF's latest global economic outlook, which, as we know, makes for some pretty grim reading. It's saying that the world will experience the worst economic fallout since the Great Depression, predicting a global contraction of 3% to GDP. Could you have ever imagined that the coronavirus would have made such an impact as this?
Well, unfortunately, it's a reality. So, yes, the IMF dramatically revised down its expectations. And I think a critical point is whereas 2008-9 financial crisis hit advanced nations hard, but emerging nations did much better. This time around, emerging nations are going to do quite poorly. So the IMF expects a 3% percentage point decline in global output. Now, it does also project a sharp rebound in 2021. I respectfully disagree with that. I think it's going to be a much slower recovery, particularly in emerging market economies that have gotten hit so hard by the lower commodity and oil prices. So if we don't get a rebound there, and if China has a slower recovery, as I expect, then the recovery, we're not only going to incur this big contraction this year, but a slower than expected recovery by the IMF.
Yes, back to your point about the emerging economies, the IMF does predict that they're in probably for the worst out of the other major economies. But I mean, that's because they're already struggling with the health response, and on top of that, the fiscal response that's needed. What needs to be done to help these nations?
Well, I think the international organizations need to provide not just health care support, but also financial support, because the emerging nations which went into the financial crisis in 2008-9 in good shape, following on the heels of China's super cycle, the high global commodity prices and oil prices that generated the exports and put their finances in good shape. This time it's just the opposite. Their finances going into this are very poor. They are not adequately equipped on a healthcare basis, and it just spells real trouble. So to answer your question, I think the IMF, World Bank, and other institutions internationally need to step up and provide help where it's needed.
Meanwhile, wealthier nations such as the US, those in Western Europe, Australia, Singapore and the like, they've unleashed trillions of dollars worth of stimulus to cushion their economies from the economic impact of the coronavirus. They're doing this in the way of handouts to people, bailing out businesses, making sure that small to medium-sized businesses can retain their staff. Is this the right approach for their economies?
Yes, it is. So it's the proper role for governments to provide support. Now, you use the word cushion. I think that's very important. When we look at, for example, the United States, where the big piece of fiscal legislation provides $2 trillion worth of support, all of the income support to individuals who've gotten laid off from their jobs, and a lot of the financial subsidies to businesses, those are strictly a cushion. They are kind of a bridge loan and grant rather than stimulus. Okay, and so what we hope for here is that while the government's done the right thing, and the Federal Reserve and other central banks have helped to avoid a financial crisis, what is needed is to get people back toward normal and back to work, but still being careful and safe. Get them back to work so you start building up product demand in the second half of the year, get spending back. If you don't do that, there's real trouble. So I think the governments have moved very, very aggressively, and I think it's been appropriate to date. They know that they're going to eventually have to take away some of this support, but it's important as a bridge right now.
Okay, Mickey Levy from Berenberg Capital Markets, thank you for your analysis as always.